The NTSB preliminary report is out on the mid-air collision of the Cessna 172 and Extra 300 aircraft at Fort Morgan, Colorado last August. Killed in the crash was 35-year-old Kristen Morris, who was in the Extra 300 aircraft, who had recently separated from the Air Force as an Air Force captain. This accident highlights the limitations of the see and avoid concept for traffic collision avoidance. And also, the report gives us a lot of the holes in the Swiss cheese of accident investigation. Let's check it out. And this video, as usual, is brought to you by the viewers like you that support this channel here on Patreon. Thank you for your support. This accident occurred here at the Fort Morgan Municipal Airport, just to the northeast of Denver, on August 31st, about 10:40 in the morning. Fort Morgan is a non-tower airport. There were NOTAMs out for the aerobatic competition that was taking place that weekend. We'll look into that in a minute. And the midair occurred when a Cessna 172 was doing a straight-in instrument approach to runway 14, collided with one of the competition aerobatic aircraft, which had just departed the aerobatic box located right about here, and was doing a short left base entry to runway 14, left downwind base and final to runway 14. This setup put the two aircraft in the classic high wing versus low wing conflict in the VFR pattern, with the Cessna 172 high wing aircraft with an instructor, a flight instructor, in the right seat and a student in the left seat under the hood until 250 feet above the ground, with the instructor in the right seat watching as safety observer, colliding with a Extra 300 which had just come out of the box and was doing the short approach left base to final, runway 14, the high wing ahead, the low wing slightly behind and above the high wing aircraft, so the low wing aircraft pilots cannot see through the wings of the high wing of the low wing aircraft or over the nose, and end up coming together just right over the threshold to runway 14. There were two aircraft involved in this mid-air collision and a total of 4 people involved in this mid-air, 2 minor injuries, 1 serious injury, and 1 fatal injury. All this was conducted under FAR Part 91 personal flights. According to the pilot of the Cessna, he was conducting instrument flight training with the assistance of a safety pilot. They were performing the RNAV GPS approach to runway 14 at the Fort Morgan Airport under VFR conditions. The pilot had made multiple radio calls on the common CTAF frequency to notify the traffic of his arrival, and he was aware of aerobatic flights occurring at the airport. The common CTAF frequency for Fort Morgan is 123.05. The pilot of the Cessna recalled hearing 2 airplanes in the traffic pattern and understood that one of them may have landed. The pilot then continued the instrument approach to his decision altitude of 48.45, or about 250 feet above the ground, and then removed his view limiting device. This is a hood, so the student is under the hood practicing instrument approaches, just focusing on the gauges, not looking outside, and the instructor is the safety pilot doing the looking outside. He's in the right seat. The Extra 300 is coming towards him from behind and to their left. He identified the runway, I assume they're talking about the student pilot now, and continued the approach visually. The pilot estimated that they were over the threshold when they heard a bang and felt forward and downward acceleration. After the impact, the 2 pilots in the Cessna immediately exited the airplane. According to the chief judge, and we'll explain a little bit about this setup for an aerobatic contest, the pilot of the Extra 300 was a competitor in an aerobatic competition and had completed his sequence. The chief judge cleared the pilot out of the competition box, and it was understood that the pilot would then switch the radio frequency from the competition box frequency to the CTAF 123.05 and communicate his intentions to enter the traffic pattern and land on the runway, or a runway, presumably runway 14. According to the competition judge, who was located about 1 mile south of the approach end of runway 14, he was observing the Extra 300 and saw both airplanes nearing the runway. He noticed that the Cessna was in front and below the Extra 300 and estimated the Cessna was at a low altitude of about 10 to 15 feet above the ground, and the Extra 300 about 15 to 20 feet above the ground. He saw the 2 airplanes collide and fall on the runway. And then immediately notified the chief judge, who called 911. If we jump down here onto Google Maps and take a look at what it looks like on the ground here near the runway, this is the departure end of runway 14. The approach end of runway 14 is up here, so the judges would have been located somewhere in this area. It's pretty much flat, featureless terrain. Okay, first, what is an aerobatic box? An aerobatic box is a chunk of airspace 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters by 2,000 feet tall, usually located between 1,000 and 1,500 feet above the ground. This is the aerobatic box that the aerobatic competitors are going to do their routine inside of. A series of judges are judging their competition routine, and one judge has a radio on a competition radio frequency separate from CTAF and is communicating with the aerobatic aircraft entering and exiting the boxes. There's a bunch of aerobatic aircraft lined up, and they got to get in and out of the box one at a time in a timely manner. Once the aircraft leave the aerobatic box, they are basically on their own to switch over to the CTAF frequency and maintain their own separation for the landing and arrival into the pattern. These rules, practices, and guidelines are all spelled out by the International Aerobatic Club here in the guidelines for contests and contest communications. It takes a lot of volunteers to safely put one of these events on, and here's a list of some of the volunteers that are needed to do a larger contest, including a chief judge and a flight director. VHF aircraft band radios are required for the chief judge, the flight director starter, and the flagman, if used. FAA waivers now require the chief judge to have radio communications with the contestant when entering and competing in the aerobatic box. Waivers also require monitoring the local CTAF Unicom frequency during aerobatic competition, usually accomplished from the flight director starter position. Note the CTAF Unicom monitor is required to have contact with the chief judge, so those two individuals need to be standing close to each other. That's why he was a mile south of the runway 14 at the time of the accident. So the primary job of the person monitoring the Unicom frequency is to keep aircraft from flying in and out of the aerobatic box, which is located right next to the airport. But most of these aerobatic aircraft only have one radio, and they have that one radio frequency tuned into the contest frequency, so they can talk to the chief judge on the radio and get their in and out clearance from the aerobatic box. But once they are out of the aerobatic box, they need to switch that radio frequency over to the CTAF frequency, which means they do not have the situational awareness of knowing what's going on in the pattern or what was going on in the pattern while they were doing their aerobatic competition. And often when these competitors leave the box, and this is pre-briefed before the contest, how are you going to re-enter the pattern? Most folks just head right to the downwind base and final and land pretty quickly rather than going all the way out for a 45-degree entry, downwind base and final back to the airport. The idea is to keep the flow of aerobatic contestants moving rather quickly and efficiently through the box. Often one aircraft will be holding short of the box, waiting for their clearance to enter the box, while the one competitor is finishing up their sequence. And these sequences are in and out in a matter of minutes of the aerobatic box. So investigators will be questioning the volunteers that were helping with the radios during the contest. And did anybody give the accident aircraft pilot the heads up that there was in fact an aircraft on the straight-in final that was going to clearly be a conflict for that aerobatic aircraft that's coming in to land? Because with a short amount of time that aerobatic aircraft left the box until they entered the pattern to come in to land, it's very likely that pilot never heard the fact that the Cessna 172 was performing this straight-in approach to runway 14. And it's likely that this low-wing aircraft could have been tracking below the nose of the extra 300, the 172, the whole time. He may have never seen that 172 until he hit him. To put it more clearly, he may have never been able to see the 172 the way things worked out. Now, if we go back and look at the arcane FAA NOTAM system for the date time and location of this contest, we can see a NOTAM informing folks that an aerobatic contest was underway. Aerobatic aircraft within an area defined as 2 nautical miles within the radius of the airport from surface to 4,000 feet will be conducted during those dates and times. But this NOTAM is just advisory in nature. And this NOTAM, if I'm reading it right, is saying that the aerodrome would be closed on August 31st from 1717Z to 0115Z. Now we got to do the Zulu time conversion to local time. 1717Z should work out to about 11:17 in the morning there at Colorado. The accident occurred at 10:40 in the morning, apparently just before the airport was about to close for the contest. The flight that Kristen was flying apparently was a memorial flight to some previous accident that had occurred at a contest a year prior. So a potential missed radio call or failure to communicate on the common CTAF frequency, no less than 5 sets of eyes missing the opportunity to see each other in a typical see and avoid sort of situation where you've got the classic case of the high wing aircraft where the pilots of the high wing aircraft cannot see through the high wings of the aircraft versus a low wing aircraft above the high wing aircraft where the pilots of the low wing aircraft cannot see below the wings of the low wing aircraft. A straight-in final instrument approach into an aerobatic contest area just prior to the airport closing before the contest, and a memorial event going on just prior to the airport closing at the same time. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.